Good morning. I'm Alan Knox. PRIMEX Pharmaceuticals is a Finnish private-owned company. We are based in Zug in Switzerland as the management team, as is everybody. I'm British, or English, may I say. So it gets a European flavour to the proceedings. We are an anaesthesia company. We're focused purely and simply on anaesthesia. More importantly, though, we're global and we're commercially focused. We have marketed, registered, approved assets that we're promoting and selling and distributing across the globe. However, what's unique about the anaesthesia portfolio is many companies in the anaesthesia field are generic. We have the first oral pediatric sedative launched and approved in Europe. And that is a game changer in this particular field. Our mission, quite simply, is to take the company today from 10 million to 100 million plus in 2024, over the next 5 years. That is predominantly driven by our pediatric sedative, both in Europe and in the US. We'd also like to develop a platform of anaesthesia products. There's a complete triad involved in the anaesthesia field. It's sedation and hypnosis, it's analgesia, and it's muscle relaxants and their reversants. And so you actually have a complementary set of a portfolio I'll come back to later. And finally, we'd obviously like to IPO in 3 to 5 years, particularly related to our US commercialization of our pediatric sedative. And so it gives us a milestone to aspire to. We have, over the last 3 years, developed a talented professional pharmaceutical team, expanding from regulatory, operations, commercial, financial, legal, and myself, who actually launched Propofol, dare I say it, in 1986 here in London at the Royal Free and St Mary's Hospital, knocking on the doors. I was brand leader for it, global brand leader for it, and I've managed the portfolio of AstraZeneca anesthetics. So it's been in my blood, so to speak. And it's really important that we have this professional team to ensure that we can drive the launches of Oselin, our pediatric sedative, in Europe. We're backed by a Finnish board and Finnish investors, and one of our board members, for example, is Jostein Davison, the ex-head of emerging markets for Takeda and ex-CEO of Acino, and he's helping to drive the strategy with us as a company. Our global strategy, though, is to be a fully integrated commercial anaesthesia company with both established products, branded generics, but also innovative reformulated medications for children and ultimately for adults. As I said, the management team has unique experience in this anaesthesia field, and we're actually quite lean. We operate with a back office with regulatory supply, QA, PV in Helsinki. We have the management team based in Switzerland, and we also have another subsidiary in Milan for Italy, I'll come back to in a moment. Our business model operates on a no high-risk R&D strategy, so we buy and build. So we acquire assets and we build those into our portfolio. We don't have our own in-house manufacturing. We utilize our contract manufacturers, and our contract manufacturers are in France, in Germany, and in Italy. And we have a scalable business model. Many of our global partners in the emerging markets are keen to take on more of our particular products that we can drive to them. And that's an important element because it's always about how you can actually distribute these products into the countries that we work with. We have over 40 partners globally. We have a network across Latin America, utilizing a national company in Mexico who have subsidiaries and distributors across Latin America. We have a major partner in Indonesia who has a network of distributors and subsidiaries in Southeast Asia. And we're working with a Swiss-based company who actually has a network of partners across the Middle East and North Africa. So again, it can be a one-stop shop, so to speak, to placing our products into those markets. However, over the last 3 years, with the now approval of our pediatric sedative in Europe, we've developed a set of partners, but also, as we heard this morning, more importantly, beginning to set up our own subsidiaries and develop our own teams. So we're not splitting the royalties 50-50 with partners, but we're beginning to get the 100%. And we've developed our own team in Italy, we're developing our own team next year in Germany, potentially Poland. So this is partly because we've been talking to investors like yourselves and realizing that we also need to invest our own sort of cash, so to speak, into developing the launch of our product. So let's come to Ozline, our pediatric sedative. As I said, it's the first oral solution pediatric sedative registered and approved in Europe. It's a sterile, preservative-free oral solution. It's been designed and developed not by us, but by Amiens Hospital in northern France. Why? An anaesthetist and a pharmacist got together and said, hang on a minute, how do we get this old drug called midazolam to basically be accepted and swallowed by children on a regular basis? And this is why they managed to reformulate. It took them 2 years. We've actually put it through manufacturing, through the regulatory process, and got it approved as a fixed dose for children from 6 months to 17 years of age. We also looked at and worked with McKinsey to validate our forecast, both in Europe and in US. And on a partnership basis, the market size is around 250 million in Europe and 500 million in US. From Ozline sales, we see peak year at around 50 million in Europe and around 100 million in US. So we see a lot of potential in this product. Why? There's a huge unmet need in children because ultimately they do not swallow this solution. They refuse it or they spit it out. And so when you have what we call frequent flyers, the kids that come back a second, third or fourth time, they completely refuse treatment, which then exacerbates and delays and postpones often procedures and surgery. And just so you know, we have held a pre-IND meeting with the FDA. I sat in front of the FDA for a grilling for an hour. They really were excited about the potential of a pediatric solution for the US. We have a fixed but a low dose. Given all the scares with opioids and benzodiazepine, this has been very much appreciated by the FDA. And we have an agreed 505(b)(2) regulatory pathway effectively recommended and approved. What we now need to do is invest money to do the development in the US to take this through to submission and approval. Ozline has characteristics, and we've launched now in UK, Finland, Norway, Denmark. We're waiting for reimbursement in France and pricing and reimbursement in Italy before the end of this year. And ultimately, we see launches in Germany, Spain, Belgium, and the rest of the Western European countries in 2020. But that's not all. We have established a product portfolio which generates a positive cash flow. We sell a branded generic of propofol, Recofol, into the emerging markets. That's how we began. We bought this from Bayer as the first original branded generic. So we have a history and a positive cash flow on the established business. Obviously, as we invest in Ozline's launch, we're beginning to burn money. Also, 3 years ago, we acquired an Italian dental business, which is very complementary. Why? They have the local anesthetics of lidocaine, mepivocaine, and articaine. But also, it's a well-established Italian dental business. And Ozline will be used in a number of sectors. Not only is it used in surgery, it's used in the dental chair. So ultimately, we see a complementary benefit of Ozline with Onya. Ozline will also be used in CT scans, emergency rooms, and in the endoscopy suites. So we're beginning to look at other complementary benefits. Our overall and arching portfolio strategy is to develop and continue our geographical expansion. As I said, we have already been in Latin America, MENA, and Southeast Asia. We're expanding in Europe. And I think that geographical expansion is very much the core element of how we're driving Ozline into the launches in the given European countries. Our target audience are basically anaesthetists. They're a specialized group. They're most practical doctors in the hospital. They're practically the only doctors who actually ever see a drug being physically used in a patient and seeing the reaction straight away. But also, we're very interested in developing the portfolio strategy across the triad of anesthesia, as I mentioned earlier. And we're looking at specifically established brands. Our finance partners are very interested in established brands because they generate cash, which actually helps to maintain and generate and develop the launches of Ozlene. And we are looking at the moment specifically at a number of established brands in the anesthesia field. We are also talking to 2 or 3 companies who have repurposed innovative anesthetics. So these are existing molecules, repurposed. One particular company is purely R&D. They have no commercial outlet. And so we're, at the moment, progressing to terms to bring in that product, again, on holding the global MA, to then commercialize that in Europe, ultimately US, and the emerging markets. So we have pretty aggressive plans in terms of how we can commercialize these particular products. The ask, so to speak, today is that we have to develop our launches in Europe specifically. That's costing us around $10 million, or 10 million euros, sorry, let's get the currency correct. 10 million euros. Why? We want to invest our own teams in Italy, in Germany, in Poland, and beyond. The rationale for that is to get 100% of that revenue back. We'd like to spend the money to take the Ozlene to the US. Again, that's an extra $10 million. Why? We need to do a BA PK/PD study versus a local US-based comparator. We need to do a human factor engineering study on the solution, the drug with the device, which is mandated by the FDA. And nowadays, given the current administration, the advice we get from many parties is that we will have to do the studies in the US rather than Europe. Unfortunately, Europe would have been 10 times cheaper. So we now have quite a load to actually look at for the US. We have a platform, an existing platform, as I said, to actually acquire additional assets and commercialize these across the globe. And without the acquisitions, we are requiring an investment of around 25 million euros. As I said, 10 million for Europe, 10 million for the US, and additional extras to continue to maintain the business. We are very excited, and we believe that in the next 5 years, we'll be able to IPO the business at a highly specialized, what I call tech pharma basis. And I close on the sort of what I call the investment highlights. We're lean, we have a commercial focus, we're focused on anesthesia, which is really a blue ocean to big pharma, because ultimately there's hardly any players in this specific field. Thank you very much for your attention.